Good afternoon, everyone. So glad to see so many familiar faces in the crowd. I was just talking with someone, and this feels like a reunion being here. Welcome to the session called People and Society, Inspiring Trust in Participatory Development Approaches, which is most definitely a mouthful if you were to say all three words in one go. My name is Jason, as mentioned. I'm the co-founder and executive director for Architects of Diversity. I work at the intersection of social cohesion, racial justice, and interfaith dialogue, which are all very easy things in Malaysia, very clearly. We work on capacity building and policy, as well as capital mobilization, and very, very difficult things, but very necessary things in Malaysia. I'm obviously joined by an incredibly distinguished panel today for what is a very important topic. To build maybe first the context behind today's session, as mentioned by the Right Honorary Helen Clark this morning, there is clearly a retreat of foreign funding with the shakeup that's happening within philanthropy today. It started in the US, it's felt in Europe, and we're feeling it all the way here, and I can speak from first-hand experience itself. And in the wave of the shockwave, we are also facing this, what we call a polycrisis, with many different things emerging at the same time. If you're a funder in the room, I can only imagine how pressured you must be, meeting so many different causes, which are all of very important and equal urgency, but we simply don't have enough resources to do everything everywhere all at once. But at the same time, as previously mentioned, this is also a time of opportunity where it's an opportunity for philanthropy to reflect, take stock, and then I think reconsider, more importantly, the ways of giving and how we partner with each other. So as I mentioned, there is a Slido, so we'll be taking questions throughout this session. I think just to set up our session today, today as philanthropy takes stock, and what do we really mean by participatory development approaches? Many of you here are perhaps getting invites to budget consultation sessions now as we approach the budget season in a couple of months. And I think when we talk about consultations and participation, I really want to focus today's session on how do we conceive of participation beyond our standard roundtables and discussions to really think about how do we distribute and reshift power to different communities. I also want to interrogate it a bit further, right? Who gets to participate and on whose terms? At Architects University, we work on social cohesion, but at the same time, there's almost very little private capital moving into social cohesion in Malaysia. So who gets to set the agenda for philanthropy in Malaysia? And what happens when that room perhaps cannot have capacity to invite everyone to the space? And more importantly, how do we also make sure that the philanthropy we do complements public institutions and make sure that we don't create parallel institutions instead? So first of all, I want to start off with you, Tony. You have experience in background in public policy and also have an experience working in international development, and now you're in a role in the capacity as a foundation, specifically the Ayala Foundation. I want to know, how do you think participatory development can be powerful, and especially in thinking about how do we have enough room and create enough space to invite different communities in, but also making sure that we have equitable both agenda setting and decision making for these communities. Over to you, Tony.
Terima kasih, Jason. Salamat tengah hari, tuan-tuan, puan-puan. It's an honor to be here. Terima kasih banyak, Yayasan Hasana, for allowing me to serve on this amazing panel. Ayala Foundation is now 64 years old. It's the socio-economic and cultural development arm of the Ayala Group of Companies, celebrating its 192nd year now in the Philippines. But my background coming to the foundation is really in tri-sector policy and development work. This means I've worked in civil society, in the private and public sectors. And I feel deeply grateful because this experience in the various sectors has allowed me to break down many preconceived notions and biases. I've found many colleagues that I love working with in all the sectors. And it has also enabled building tri-sector networks that help facilitate collaboration and participation. So I'd like to share a story. For 6 years, I was asked to be the conference director of a multi-stakeholder participatory workshop called Sulong Pilipinas. I understand sulong means eldest in Malay, but in Filipino it means forward. So forward Philippines. For the first 2 years, I did this as a volunteer from the private sector. I was asked to organize these consultation workshops on behalf of the economic team of the Philippine government. And then after the second round, the Minister of Finance said, okay, it's time for you to join government and run it from the ministry. And I said, but I'm very happy to be a volunteer. And the minister said, but I want to be able to fire you if you do a bad job. So I joined government as an assistant minister, as an assistant secretary of the Department of Finance to work on consultations and participation, as well as the comprehensive tax reform program. And so some of the results of these consultative workshops were the massive infrastructure program that the government put as a top priority for many years. We worked on sin tax reform of unhealthy products to help fund universal health care, and the ease of doing business law, which gave civil servants deadline for responding and being responsive to citizen requests. Of course, this came back to bite me when I joined government, right? But looking back, if I may just summarize the experience, I think some important words for this panel are trust and participation. And as I think back and reflect, what provided our participants from different sectors enough trust to keep coming back for 6 years? Because we ran 15 of these consultative workshops over those 6 years. And participants would keep joining us and keep recommending actions. And there were a few principles that we did our best to apply. The first is credible commitment. We had to persuade the decision makers, the president or cabinet ministers, that they should co-own this participatory process, and that the outputs of the process should guide executive action. And so we invited them, and we made sure that in advance of these consultations, they agreed to receive the recommendations coming out of the conference. Second, I think it's important that we did our best to have a fair and transparent participatory process. And my years at the World Bank sort of helped, because we studied 21st century town hall models where everyone would be seated at a round table like you are now, and the experts would come in only at the beginning and upon request of the table. And then the tables would discuss, deliberate, debate, and come up with their own actionable recommendations at the individual level. And then everyone could visit everyone's recommendation and vote on which recommendation they thought was the best. And the top 10 were submitted to government. Now, so that was at least a version of a fair and transparent participatory process. And the last is that there was delivery and mutual accountability. That there were development outcomes that were reported back regularly to participants of this process, and that for the government officials, they built their political capital by using good governance as a tool for good politics. So those three principles were what we did our best to implement.
Right. Thanks, Tony. I mean, you and I mean, these are important principles, and co-ownership is so important. And because we all know we've been in spaces where no one's really owning the space, but we are all in it. And sometimes it feels that we're not sure what the point of it is. And I want to go to you. I mean, everyone I think here knows about PACOS Trust and your work with communities at the edge over the years. I would like to know, I mean, you and I have both been in consultations where we don't know what the outcome is and it feels like it's going nowhere. What do you think is most important, and what works when it comes to shifting power to communities in participation? And I think more importantly, what do you think doesn't work as well?
Okay, Piposian, good afternoon. First of all, thank you to Yasan Hasana for having me and to be part of this panel. Well, I think PACOS is a community-based organization. It's one of those organizations that has benefited from global philanthropy that shifted to more participatory development that centers on the voice of communities, voices of leadership in the community. And I remember those days because we started in 1980s. Most of the funding that we had were from overseas. There was very little funding from within Malaysia. It's always welfare-oriented. And we were not doing welfare, we were doing empowerment work, we were doing human rights work. We are talking about justice. So it was very difficult at that time in the 80s. But I think now, in the 2000, we have Yasan Hasana, and they are talking about justice. And the time when the funders from overseas started withdrawing from Malaysia because they said, oh, Malaysia don't need the money, you're a developing country, we thought, oh, we have to close shop. But it didn't stop. The community was strong, and we had new movement in Malaysia. And so here we are together, gathering. And for me, over the years, 30 years working, trying to work in philanthropy, working with donors, I think what was the most that worked and effective was, of course, is the leadership. Leadership, not only at government level, at the donor level, but also at the community level. We must also have that vision. We must also want to change. And first of all, I think the leadership in the community, we need to talk to them, and I think we have heard about that in the morning. But I think at that level of philanthropy, I remember a lot of times when we first started, there were not many foundations that wanted to work long term, but we were lucky when we started to engage with a foundation that is founded in Malaysia. Like we had a good relationship with Yasan Dayadiri. We had about a 10-year-long relationship, and they were willing that time, because we needed time to build, to work long term. You need time to build relationship that trust each other, that understand one another. So it's a lot of times willingness to work long term is very important. So we have heard that change does not come very fast. And then we also need to invest in building capacity, especially in community. Like us, we are a community-based organization. We have to also understand what is consistency, what is transparency, what's accountability. It's those kinds of things. We are very busy working in the community. We don't have that on paper. So those I feel are very important, and we must provide also opportunity to communities to have direct access to funding. That's what we are doing now. Small funding, but they also learn to manage funds. And so I think that's one of the things that is very important. But we have heard from the government also. The government also plays a very important role in supporting philanthropy. I think we have Yasan Hasana now, and they're doing so many great things. It's actually because of the government have this drive. They're setting aside funds in their yearly budget, should be very important. And also tax, providing tax exemption. So organization who wants to give money, or people, individuals, it's quite hard in Malaysia to find a tax exemption to apply. How do we do that? It's very difficult. So I think those are things that are needed to make it going. Of course, as we know, if those that doesn't work are not culturally not culturally appropriate, or they don't listen to the community, or you don't listen to the target group, or you is what we call touch and go. Memang tidak jadilah. I mean, we only waste money on that one. That's for now.
Thanks. I mean, even in this room, right, this is one of the largest philanthropic forums I've ever seen in Malaysia, right? I think it is the largest. But at the same time, on a more practical term, we cannot assemble everyone in one space. I mean, there are restrictions, physical restrictions to how big a space can be. And therefore, we need leaders. We need representations of people coming in. So Neelam, I kind of want to take it to you. In your work with Industree, you've really worked at kind of the nexus of government, philanthropy, and as well as communities over the years. And you've, I think more importantly, worked in scaling up work with these communities, be it from their own social enterprises, right? My question to you, I guess, when we are at scale, right? So I think it's when we are working in smaller scales, we perhaps could all assemble in a room like this. But at the point at which we are talking about millions, right? If our work was effective, eventually you have very agentic communities, and everyone wants a piece of the room. How are we going to, one, I guess, accommodate all of them? But more importantly, in this work of representation, that we don't reproduce that same system of elites or systems of representation that perhaps could prohibit a full ownership or power sharing among communities?
Yeah, so I'll try to answer the question. So at Industree, we work on creating economic opportunity for rural women, right? So we've struggled for 30 years, very much like Anne, and we took the lever of creative production, which in other words is called handicraft and handloom and batik and things. But I have never called it that. I've called it creative production, because India is a country with vast numbers, and unless you do numbers, the government is never going to take you seriously. And if you're going to do systems change, you got to go with solutions to the government. Because frankly, the amount of money that the government spends on all kinds of upliftment is going to be far more than what a philanthropy would ever do. So I'm always going to try to answer your question. So I would say that when you're talking about scale, and when you're talking about how do you keep a direction, and how do you keep participatoriness, so it works for the community, always remember market solutions, right? And I think SDG 17 and partnerships, even in the morning, there was a speaking about this, but when you're talking scale, the three key partners are public, that's the government, private, that's market, and third is communities, the people who are participating. If you keep these three together, now for example, when we do economic opportunity, unless we will think about the market, we cannot do economic opportunity. Because finally, when a community makes something at scale, they have to sell it somewhere. So that, I think, a bridging of all three, and as civil society and as people who work with communities, I think that's super important. And it would be the same for even if it was cities, because everywhere there is market opportunities are everywhere. So if we keep these three key pillars, so for example, in India today, we're working with the Ministry of Rural Development. They've got the National Rural Livelihoods Mission. So India has numbers, so don't get boggled by the numbers. We are helping 1 million women plant bamboo. And now we can imagine the amount of bamboo that will come out from these 1 million women after 4 years, 10 years. And therefore, where will this bamboo eventually go? Where is it going to sell? We have to know everything from the beginning. And that is where the participatoriness, not just of the communities, like first it is, okay, how would this scale for 1 million women? Then you work with a few women, and then you understand that, okay, if they average own 2 acres of land, only 0.3 acre goes to bamboo. Only 60 saplings to each woman. So you build a model in a participatory way with communities, then you go to markets. And you talk to all the companies, the biggest companies in India. and say, what would you need bamboo for? And then somebody, the paper and pulp say we need it for paper. The textile industry says we need it for bamboo fabric. The lumber industry says we need it for engineered wood. The steel industry says we need it for briquettes for our net zero targets. So that's how we are able to bridge. You got to see a problem from 360 degrees, and the community definitely needs to be involved, but the community is never really going to know what's happening at a very, very, very macro level, at a meta level. So we were discussing over lunch the carbon sequestration that will happen. Now, where are the carbon markets, right? Because these communities can earn from carbon, right? For the next 50 years, 100 years. So I would just say that this whole concept of us being able to also enable the communities to think in a meta way, to think of the larger. It's like we were talking about the tiger and about the kids who didn't know the secrets of the forest, right? I think our communities are like that. They don't know the secrets of the commercial jungle. So we have to be able to open those secrets out to them. And all this takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of long-term investment. And we've got to be, and obviously when we will, especially in this bamboo program, we are not doing what China did. China's done a single species of bamboo. We're doing 16 species of bamboo. We're looking at biodiversity. We're looking at seed to sapling. We can't accept a tissue culture. So there's so much complexity. And we will make mistakes. So patience and long-term thinking, I think, is key when you're looking at any kind of activity that starts small. Because anything that starts small and is a success will scale.
Yeah. I mean, this is really civic participation, right? Enabling communities to, as you mentioned, the meta level, understanding how decisions are made, and then really providing input to make sure that their voices are being heard. On that note, I guess, I want to also connect that being heard is one thing, but also being involved and being able to hold people and decision makers accountable in that decision-making process, right, is equally important. Dato Hamdan, I want to turn to you as Think City as well. I mean, I think everyone in this hall has interfaced with the, really traces of Think City's work, be it in Chinatown or be in Penang, that really I've also seen firsthand how Think City has also done ground-up consultations with your constituencies as well. My question, I guess, in this nexus of inviting people into the space, hearing them, how do we also make sure that as we build our philanthropic and civil space, right, for communities to own that by themselves, and as Think City also does, how do we make sure that ecosystem doesn't supplant or replace and rather works in complementary ways with our public institutions, right? So rather than working in parallel, how, for example, would we be able to synergize between government, philanthropy, and communities in a way that makes most sense? I mean, in your work as well, between Think City, the Dewan Bandarayas, in the mayorships all across Malaysia, how has that worked out, and what do you think has been lessons to make sure that that complementariness maintains in your work?
I think, let me start with what our Treasury Secretary said today, that for Malaysia to move forward, it's not its whole of government, it's whole of society. So that's one. Two, I think we need to be clear that the third sector is existing because there is failure or gaps that government or private sector is unable or not being effective to deliver. And we heard some of the examples earlier after lunch today with the, how the marine ecosystem issues down to what they call failures in education and so on. So the reality is that there is a fundamental role of the third sector. And the backbone to the third sector has been philanthropy. Now, is the role of philanthropy creating creating a dependency relationship with public institution? The reality is that it depends on how we approach it. Because all of these issues that we deal with, whether it's education, public space, environment, it's in the purview of the public sector. But that's reality, right? In a sense that we are dealing with public sector matters, that whether it's city government or the what you call national governments, these are all what they call under the jurisdiction and probably oversight of government. So you can't run away from government. Rather, I think we should take an approach to say that it is about participatory approach where we want to harness, and this has been the Think City model where we say that, look, we work in the intersection between government, private sector and community. But how do we make sure that we are all aligned and making the same journey? While we have different approaches, but we are on the same journey. And we are filling in the gaps with regards to how we do it and giving them the space and autonomy to function in the best ways possible. Because if we are going there to what you call take over government or private sector, then there's something wrong with what we're doing. We are there to augment. So I think some examples, maybe I can say that the lessons that we have learned along the way is the fact that what I call empowerment is very key. I think this word is stakeholder empowerment. So how do we do this? So obviously we want to make sure that we live through this idea of kill the savior complex. So that you want to make sure that we are not there to just be there, but rather you want to make sure that you equip people, you enable people, and make them to become the champions. So an example would be, we have run a program with in the public housing community where across 10 public housing involving 50,000 people, and we decided to take, while we were actively involved in the grassroots level, so one of the things that we did was to actually create a public grants program and get the community to decide in terms of what should be the priorities. The projects comes from them, the community selects the project, we enable them, we equip them, and we empower them. And the results has been spectacular in terms of outcomes. More than what you call 39 projects, nearly over 700 activities, 3,000 participants, and 201 local leaders. All of a sudden, these people, who people thought were seen to be people who could not deliver or likelihood of failure in grants, we have had 0 failures. So having belief and empowering them is key. 2 is that I think designing with government and not around them. Government is integral in the whole process. We can't avoid, or neither are we there to what you call dispel. Rather, we are needing to work in partnership, and only then we can make progress. So one of the key things is that in any of this, like in the area that we work, if the mayor is not on the table, then it's the beginning of a failure. We're not here to run parallel governments. You need to make sure that the city government or the state is behind these efforts, and they acknowledge there's some gaps, and we are not there to overshadow them, but rather to empower them and what you call augment the situation. So one of the things that we do very early on when we work, we make sure that this is well established. So there's absence of distrust. There's no trust deficit. Rather, we make sure that we are in partnership. And an example of this that we've been working up in Penang for the last 15 years. So there's a very strong partnership to the extent we have a joint company been established to support the area transformation work that we have been doing. So again, we can only do this because we have kind of created an environment to function with trust, and we agree to a common plan and making sure that we move forward. The third thing I think we learned along the way is that how do we use data in a very effective way so that decisions are not based on political will or whims or what do you call, what we feel like, but rather it's based on what we call a 5D process: diagnose, design, demonstrate, deliver, and document. And we have used this as a model. So we have done, in the case of our program on what I call nature-based solution for climate adaptation, we went through an extensive process of community engagement, cultural mapping. We also went to do technical work around heat mapping, understanding the needs and the complexities of society, and then from that develop solutions which are bottom-up. Because it's about people that, most of the time, sometimes we forget as we do our work, don't lose sight of the purpose of why we're doing this for. It is not for the purpose of purely solving the issues of heat, but rather impacting positively on communities. And lastly, I always make sure that my team is reminded, look, have the end in mind, make sure that we don't get lost. The worry is that, they call it the word in, don't carry the you know, in the Thaipusam festival, they carry the kavadi. Don't carry the kavadi, rather it should be carried together. Number two, but more importantly, have an exit clause planned out. That means that sustainability of the program must be thought up front with a clear exit in mind and knowing when to exit.
Thanks. I think that's a really great model of working with communities, but I think perhaps in reality, to build trust, we need to first find a common goal. But I think you and I and many people in this room have also been in rooms where we have different goals, right? And sometimes there are flavors peppered of hostility, perhaps there's less trust built in between people, where perhaps it's either a misunderstanding, or even if you understand each other, perhaps there are diametrically opposed goals, right? And then the room gets heated, and it feels that this participatory room gets kind of broken down. So Tony, I'm gonna push this challenge question to you. How have you navigated, being on both sides of the field, right? Where perhaps in very contentious fields, even when it comes to policy decisions, I've been in education roundtables where people just cannot agree on what's the angle to move forward, right? What happens in those rooms, and how have you managed the tensions in those spaces?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. This is easier said than done, but I think lowering the temperature in the room can be achieved by focusing on core interests and values. Because in their heart of hearts, the stakeholders want what's best for the children, what's best for the communities, what's best for the future. And so if you step away from the opinions, which could be very contentious, and the policy prescriptions that each party will bring to the table, and go back to what are our values and what do we really care about, then let's build the conversation around that. I think what happens sometimes is the conversations start with the opposing opinions. But again, I think it's important to go back to why. Why do you believe that? What is it really that we want to achieve? And so that requires a lot of listening. The minister spoke earlier about humility, right? And he said that philanthropy that listens requires a deep sense of humility. And I think that's something that philanthropy can also subsidize, to enable listening. And there are tools and techniques that are available in order to get people around the table to stop shouting and to start listening, and to start listening intently. And so that means that for the community partners and the stakeholders, we understand better the local contexts, the realities on the ground, why things might work and why they might not. And for the decision makers, it's, I think, also helpful if what they perceive is that they're listening to informed opinions that have taken expertise into account, right? And so facilitating that process is something that philanthropy can enable. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. I mean, again, as you mentioned, right, this is going to take time and a lot of patience. And sometimes people don't show up with humility. And that's the reality that we live in, right? Both, I guess, from decision-making ends as well as community ends. And I want to throw this to you and kind of twist that question, right? I mean, you're coming from the community side as well. I think especially working in Sabah in many marginalized communities where perhaps there's a lot of distrust of authorities, right? Where due to decades of perhaps injustice or perhaps of mismanagement of development, where perhaps that level of conversation is approached with some skepticism. How have you navigated the spaces, and what approaches do you think are important to take note of when inviting people, especially marginalized communities, into these spaces?
Okay, Jason, as you say, in Sabah there are 39 different communities that we work with in the language group. And long time ago, we were headhunters. Among us, we fight. And when we first started working in a community, I'm a Kadazan, and we started working in the interior, in the Murut, and they like to poison each other. So that's real. So my mother will be very worried. You're going to this community, they will give you poison. You'll come back with a bloated stomach and then you will die. But that didn't happen. So it's actually building the trust. Actually, when we went, they're also human beings, just like us, and looking at the same issue, facing the same problem, even actually concerned about same things. And then, of course, for us, we are a community-based organization, and we work as a human rights organization. We have to bring the voices of those who are not heard, the indigenous community. And that is also very difficult because sometimes people don't, because we're not very big numbers, so when people want to take our territory, they said they want to bring development, they don't ask us because they said, we know better. And then once we start to come up and say, no, please speak to us, then sometimes the authority will not be very happy or the developer will not be happy. Oh, they said, oh, this is PACOS teaching you to say out. But not really. We have learned that working, it is difficult sometimes, but we have also learned to work using nature. We said we must work like the wind. You can feel the wind, you can see the leaves moving, but you cannot feel it. When you are at that situation, your impact is greater. So, that's the wisdom. And so we dialogue with authorities, and as you say, humility is very important. We cannot shout all the time. We also must build friends. We must build collaboration. And one of the things that is very important is we build and we bring communities together. So we build the different communities, different villages, they're together, and every year they will talk about what they're doing in a village. And I would imagine one day, Yasana Sana will bring all the partners together, and we have sharing what each partner is doing, and we learn from one another. And that will be awesome, no? And I think we look forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to be in that room, of all the Hasana partners being in one room. But at the same time, I think I'm imagining myself as a funder, that might be a very scary place. And I'm also basing it off the questions on Slido, so please keep the questions coming. I want to pose these questions both Dato Hamdan and Neelam, kind of both sides of the coin, right? I think, when people say trust, it's very sometimes buzzwordy, and especially with bringing such a huge community together and a very strong voices, right? And perhaps moderating those voices can seem sometimes very difficult. I think for a lot of people in the room, maybe this is a question off the Slido, when we talk about participatory development approaches, how much are funders willing to let go of decision making, or at least setting the frame, right? Especially when it comes to capital investments, when it comes to communities setting the agendas themselves. I mean, speaking from personal experience, sometimes when we're writing grants, right, we're like shoehorning ourselves into a specific framework sometimes, rather than it being a conversation between two different people. So maybe first, let me push it to Dato Hamdan, and then Neelam, I'll pass it to you. How do you think, and how do we really innovate for participatory development approaches, and maybe perhaps bringing in things that you have learned across the years as well?
I think maybe just to kind of connect where the other two speakers have said, I think we should not first and foremost fear in dealing with hard issues, and the fact that we can agree to disagree with people, and finding at the end of the day, I think there's what I call goodness in everyone, and finding that humanity in things. Because the reality is that far too long, we kind of narrowly work among ourselves as opposed to working together. So finding ways to work together is very, 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 very key, because the reality is that we can't get things done alone. So when your question is that how much controls that we need or funders have on us we are a delivery organization, or how much, levers that we have to function. I think it goes back to the principle of we need to make sure that we have in place what I call policies, processes, systems that are needed to make sure that we are auditable any point in time. We have processes on which we are defensible, and what I would call that we have an environment also for innovation and risk-taking. Because without innovation and risk-taking, we cannot move forward. And we need to have autonomy to function on the ground, because decisions has to be made based on the realities that we see. Now, I'll give you an example. Maybe this is just to share with you all here. We started a program in Kuala Lumpur, now known as Warisan KL. This is started about a decade ago. It was the belief of a young organization then, Tan Sri Matno Yusof and the team in Hasana, who believed to say that they supported what I call a grant program that we initiated in this remaking of downtown Kuala Lumpur, has been the core of what has made possible for the transformation that we have seen. Together with some resources from government and Hasana, today, with probably about 50 million in investment, we are seeing crowding in what I call in billions in terms of investment into the area transformation. We are seeing greater amount of social inclusion and social transformation. Now that is possible because there is what I call not only a proven track record, but there's a very structured process on which we work between a funder and what they call an implementation body, making sure there's adequate amount of reporting and making sure there's greater visibility for them to see and work through this. But at the same time, giving us the space, staying at a distance and giving us the space to do the job that we do best.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is also trust-based philanthropy, right? Where you do the due diligence up front, and then you trust the communities that they know what they're doing best. I also know that as I'm also a civil society organization, there are very few trust-based philanthropies around, and so navigating that sometimes feels a bit precarious. Neelam, I mean, you Industree started small and you grew to the size that you are now. Talk to us about
yes, I will
that
tell
situation.
You about when we were small. So all the smaller, budding, younger, older, you can be a social entrepreneur and you can be older, but you could be new on the ramp. Look, it's all about your passion. It's all about your deep, deep, deep belief in the cause. And my husband laughs. He says, Neelam, you speak in such a convincing way that sometimes you're just saying something lightly, but you say it so convincingly that I believe you, But that's just the way I learned to be, right? Because we had nothing, and we struggled, and we grew, and it was a huge slog for the first 15 years, because I was a for-profit social enterprise. I did not get grants. I had to earn every penny, and I had to pay the payroll, and I paid salaries 2 months late, and I've struggled, I've suffered, right? And today, I don't have a single for-profit. I've made everything owned by producers, because everyone's talking a lot about blended finance, but I'm a guru on blended finance. I'm a practitioner of blended finance, okay? I started a company so that it was market-oriented. It would sell what producers would make. But when I went to philanthropy to say, now support these producers so that they can sell through the company, everybody turned around and said, why would we give grants if the sales will happen from your company? So I said, fine, I shut down the company. I said, no, I will never own a company. Okay, so now we build producer-owned companies, which are basically cooperatives. And you know how difficult it is for a cooperative to become profitable? It's one of the most difficult things on the planet. All right? But yes, we'll do it. But that's because nobody understands blended finance. They'll talk about it, right? But blended finance is when grants will go to seed something, and grants will go to capacity build communities, and grants will go to stuff that market-based money will not go to, and then there will be a market-based entity which ideally could be privately owned. which will then do the market-oriented activities. And that will raise impact investment. So anybody who wants to set up any funds that want to do real impact need to think about that, seriously, right? Coming back to philanthropy, when you're small, all you need is huge faith and belief to convince people. But please stick to what you have to do, because when you have faith and commitment in what you want to do, you can convince anybody about anything. That's the first mantra, right? And stick with it, it'll be hard. It'll take you years. So what? Right? So I admire that lady with the whales and the dolphins. It's okay. Just go ahead. Just do it. And the next thing is that today, I did all the hard work, which is why I retired. But today, my CEO, and we've got a reasonably well-funded non-profit today, and he's like, ma'am, I'm not taking money from anyone who's going to tell me what to do, ever. He refuses. He doesn't take the money, yeah? And then the team that's slogged with one of those biggest trusts in the country is pleading with him. I've spoken to them for 12 months, now they're at the table. He said, yeah, but they're putting conditions. I'm not accepting these conditions. So that's about it. I think that's the hallmark of all of us. If you're going to take up difficult problems, let's be prepared for the difficult path. And it's okay, we'll survive. I mean.
Tony, you have something to say.
Yeah.
Thank you, Neelam. Jason, I just wanted to say that I wish everyone had Neelam on their team, but I don't think we can have as many as we need in the world. And just back to your question that started this part of the conversation off, what do you do when you come across contention and opposing opinions? So bringing people together on values, on their deepest beliefs, that's well and good. But once it comes to when a decision needs to be made and there's a competition over resources, then it sometimes happens that it does become a zero-sum game, right? And so my suggestion also is, while we improve our skills at getting to people's values and beliefs, we also need to increase our skills in negotiation. Because sometimes, in the end, it will be a compromise solution. And so knowing whom to negotiate with, having a big sense or a good sense of the stakeholder environment, with whom should I be having this conversation, with whom should I be making concessions, and in the end, with whom should I be making a credible commitment, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in such a scenario, sometimes no one's happy with the decision, right? In a democracy, in a compromise, you walk the middle path, but sometimes the middle path is sometimes a bit unsatisfactory.
No, that's what they say. When a compromise is fair, the best indication of that is no one's happy.
Yeah, I mean, I started this journey 5 years ago when I co-founded AOD, and the amount of negotiation to work, to learn. First of all, I'm very happy that I could pay myself. That's the first thing. And so as a Zillennial, I kind of also want to highlight that dignified work aspect. But also, I come from a rather privileged background, but I also realize that not many communities have access to so many of these tools, right? And I mean, Neelam, you talked about blended finance. We provide seed funding for youth organizations, and we teach basic organizational skills. And it is tough. It is incredibly tough, right? You're talking about really executive level skills, and you're hoping for youth, you're hoping for battered women, you're hoping for marginalized groups to learn all these things. So obviously, I'm going to turn this to you. And how are we going to be able to invest in our community leaders to make sure that they're able to engage in these spaces meaningfully? Because I think you and I have both seen, right? It's a big town hall, it's nice CSR tokens, but not only sometimes are the decisions a bit we're not informed afterwards, but perhaps the diversity in the room sometimes are there for tokens. How do we make sure that they have meaningful participation as well?
Yeah, I think even in communities, there are politics. They are fighting for position. So I think the first thing is we also need to know the community, build their trust with us, our relationship. And from our 30 years of work with the community, actually we found that if we invest in women to build them as leaders, Neelam was saying, don't take those who are very outspoken, very true. Because very soon they will be the branch leader of a party politic because they can make speeches. And it's true for all of us from our experience working with the community learning centers, working with mothers, those who are doing the work, who are working very hard, who are willing to participate in the activity, are the one that we need to invest. And for us, we have to learn, it's not easy, it takes a long time, but things like filing, when you have money, what do you do, filling in the form, those are very basic but very important. And that is what makes the whatever we do lasting. And for me, I have seen our community learning center, we have been there for 25 years. We have seen the children grow when they were young mothers. Their children have gone to universities, and their children are now working outside, but they're back helping their communities. So these are the investments you have to make. It takes time. You must have the patience. We have spoke about that today. Keep at it, and we will have that success.
I mean, it takes time, right? It takes time. But Dato Hamdan, I also want to hear from you, right? I mean, we've seen, we know where Think City works, and a lot of times it's your pakcik, your hawker centers, people who are, have jobs to do, right? And you're expecting them, on one hand, you want involved communities, right? Very deeply involved ones. Perhaps one day they'll seek a political career. But also, in a community setempat, right, in the local community, you have people who are already affected by your policies or by your efforts and initiatives. How have you made sure that, how have these conversations gone with your hawker centers, shop owners, the people who are perhaps squatting in the area as well?
I think the realization is that any change, there will be resistance. The challenge is that how do you build inroads into these communities so that they need to see in their own lens what you are trying to actually bring to them. If you don't get at that level, then you will not succeed. Whether it's working with asset owners, or whether you're working with hawkers, or whether you're working with public housing communities, fundamental is actually you have to build inroads into the community. I think that's the most and first and foremost thing to do. Second is that you've got to have belief in them. They need to see you genuinely, that you are there to work through them. It's not a fly-by-night, top-down, someone giving money or giving tick box. No, you are actively involved to work with them, co-create, develop, participate, go through that, challenges that they are going through, understanding from their lens. Third is, I think, helping them through the process. You talked about whether it's filing, filling in forms, whatever it means. So in every one of our grant process, we try to make it inclusive. If you can't read English, here's a Malay form. You can't read a Malay form, here's a Chinese form. We try to make sure that it reaches, language should not be a barrier, or people's what they call limitations should not be an obstacle. We work with them so that because this whole idea is participation, because people, in the case of us, we work in cities, we fundamentally believe in this principle of saying people make cities. Cities is about people, and how to make sure that we celebrate them, we empower them, we make them to become the champions, make them to become the heroes. And I think that's the only way to do this, you see. Without this, we cannot happen. Now, maybe I'd share one example that we recently had, this is more in the public housing community, where we worked with, across this 10 public housing, we worked with mothers, and we kind of trained them on early childhood development. We earlier heard about stunting and other things. And we said, look, this problem has to be dealt with at the core level. So we managed to get nearly 88 of them to go through a program and training. I think we worked with our partners like Thrive Well and others, where it eventually, as a result of it, now today they're caregivers. They have become a resource in the community. And importantly also that they can now stand out and be on their own feet because they can also earn an income. Now, how do you start with these people who felt that they could not do this, but to go through the journey end to end and seeing through the difficult times? Because sometimes they don't have time, they got other obligations. So I think it's a marathon, and realizing that there's no short-term fix, that you need to go the steady course of working hand on hand with them.
And just as we're running out of time, maybe picking on that, right? Say that all that works. And Neelam, I'm going to put the last question to you before we do the closing. Say we succeed in these participatory development approaches, right? At the philanthropic level, Hasana's worked it out, many different foundations have worked it out. What happens after that? Piggybacking off what Boon Hyung was mentioning in the earlier session, right? The idea is that we want the philanthropy to be a sandbox where we experiment and then we incorporate it within broader governance and in the government. How is that, have you seen that? And does that sometimes work for your end? And does that participation continue when you scale up all the way to government?
Yeah, definitely, because 20 years ago, when we even started, I designed everything after meeting government guys. So it was embedded in the system from the beginning, though we were not part of any government program, but it was embedded in the system. So when after 25 years we went to the government, we had a model that fit them. It could just go in and snap in, right? So it's important that when you design your methodology, understand what the government is doing. Even the government models will evolve. Keep in touch, see how they're changing, right? Because I now believe that governments, actually desperately, most of them are trying to do a good job, this way or that way or any way. They're all trying, right? So you always should design a system which will plug in there, and then obviously if you are strong enough, do advocacy side by side, so then even they can kind of move in that direction, right? Whichever is the right direction, right?
And there you have it, folks. Really, it's all this is really idealistic to say, right? And whether or not we can actually implement it, not only whether or not it gets taken up by asset holders and philanthropies, but building that trust is going to take time.
Yeah, and Jason, I think participation actually is hard work. It's really not easy to do, and to do it well requires strategic thinking. It should be strategic participation. You cannot have participation every step of the way because that would slow things down a lot. But you also cannot not have participation because participation allows things to last for a longer time, right? Any initiative or any effort. So we have to be strategic about it, and we also have to be committed to doing it. The good news is, it's like a muscle, right? If you do it for the first time, it's difficult. You do it the second time, it's difficult. But if you do it over and over again, people get used to it. And you have that participatory muscle that you can keep using. But that requires a toolkit. And so I think we should have participatory toolkits so that we know that in different contexts, in different, for different issues, we can deploy different tools. Yeah.
Perfect. I'm going to do one last round. Essentially, the same question to all of you, so around 30 seconds to kind of end it off. And maybe perhaps we can go in this direction, starting from Neelam and ending in Anne. What is one thing, perhaps also speaking to both foundations, asset holders, but also a lot of civil society organizations here, right? In your opinion, what is one thing that needs to change in mainstream philanthropy so that we can better inspire trust with communities?
So someone gave a Martin Luther King quotation in the morning. I immediately went and Googled it because it was awesome, right? That philanthropy is commendable as long as you remember the root causes of why that economic injustice happened. So I think non-profits all over the world do that. What was the injustice that caused maybe all the problems? So someone's got to invest, right, into understanding those root causes. And that's, if you solve for the root cause, its systems change, but the root cause no longer is revolution. In the past, it used to be revolution. So now it's all of us who are quietly going round and round the problem, not unsettling too many people, being participatory, looking for the systems change levers, right? So someone's got to help us do it, and that's philanthropy, right? So as long as philanthropy remembers that there'll be a lot of mistakes made along, there'll be a lot of trials and errors, because there is no solution. If it was there, it would have already been done, right? So I think that's the important thing.
So, thank you, Neelam. Dato Hamdan.
I see that the future is there's a greater role for philanthropy. Philanthropy will have to shift from its mindset from that, it can't just be a passive, I wouldn't say passive or rather, I think they need to be an activist. They have to take an activist role. And I think they need to think about pushing the boundaries of game changing, because a lot of what we have seen over the last 2-3 decades, definitely philanthropy is the one who has pushed for innovation, pathfinding, and doing things differently. And probably because it enables people to take risk, but obviously with what I call taking responsibility in a responsible way, and making sure that we make ourselves accountable, transparent, and making sure that we are auditable.
Right. Tony.
Yeah, nothing will build trust in participatory approaches more than results. And I think achieving those results requires what you just said, accountability, transparency, and all of that requires mutual listening. So if philanthropy can subsidize those mutual listening mechanisms, I think we'd be off to a really good start. Thanks.
And last one, and
Yeah, I think philanthropy will play a very important role in Malaysia, and it complements the work of the government. And I think philanthropy needs to be flexible too, so that it can also give not just on specific purpose or costs, but it will also give to co-funding, which is needed by all community organizations. Thank you.
I really hope all these lessons, if you're an asset holder in the room, pick this up. If you're a community org, that you're working with your partners, right? Working with to really push these lessons up. That's all the time we have today. I'm going to end this panel with a pantun. I haven't heard a pantun today yet. Very quick, bukan karya saya. Bunga cempedak, harum mengawangi, mekar indah di tepi laman. Terima kasih Hasanah dan hadirin di sini. Semoga bertemu bila berkesempatan. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Neelam, Dato Hamdan, Tony, and really appreciate all your time. MC, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jason, and also to all our panelists for that truthful, insightful. Thank you very much. Yes, hopefully moga-moga kita akan bertemu lagi. Alright, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, it is a powerful reminder that trust and long-term relationships are the bedrock for any intervention. You know what, guys? After spending so many hours in the same ballroom, you and me, I'm hoping that we have built a trusting relationship. Where I could trust you, you have downloaded the app. If you haven't, it's okay. I will stick with my principle. I will dedicatedly reminding you until you download it and use it. Alright, I know it takes time. Hopefully, it won't take too long. Just a joke, guys. I know it's a bad one. I know it has been a long day, a lot of information today to digest. However, please bear with me because we have two more sessions to go. And these two sessions actually are crucial because they will tie everything together, covering everything from scaling social enterprises to building resilient community. And it is the perfect way to wrap up our incredible day one. So please bear with us. Our first session for this final leg of the day is a deep dive into the world of social finance. Scaling social enterprise, laying the groundwork for social finance. Ladies and gentlemen, now please allow me to welcome our moderator for this session, Ms. Maxim Cheng, Team Lead of the Insights and Innovations at Roots of Impact. Please give a warm welcome to the stage. Joining Ms. Maxime on stage, our esteemed panelists. Please welcome Professor Emeritus Dato Dr. Muhammad Azmi Omar, President and CEO, NCF University, followed by Mr. Yoshi Tabuchi, co-founder, Zebras and Company Incorporated. Last but not least, we have Miss Swin Lee, co-founder and CEO, Enuma Incorporated. Ladies and gentlemen, just like in our previous sessions, we would like to hear from you as well. So we encourage you to ask your question by scanning the QR code on the screen. Miss Maxine, the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maxime from Roots of Impact. Roots of Impact started with the mission to fill the financing gap of social enterprises through innovative financing instruments and structure. By doing that, we allow different types of capital players to participate, while at the same time focusing on impact creation through social enterprises. At the same time, Roots of Impact is also a social enterprise ourselves, and we also raise impact capital that link financial terms to the impact that we create. So I've seen it firsthand how linking financial incentives with impact is actually possible, but also it can be simple and practical. So as you might imagine, the topic of today's panel, scaling social impact and setting the groundwork for social finance, is really close to my heart. At the same time, as we heard many times today, apart from innovating how financial instruments can be structured, can be one way of scaling impact. But given the fact that, well, we feel that like the funding cut in the US, in the Europe, also very substantially here. So one key to the situation is also how we can mobilize different types of capital to be deployed to scale impact. And I think we're very honored to be here today to have such an exceptional panelist to share the different perspective of social finance. So thanks a lot, Yaya Hassana, for inviting me here today to moderate this panel, but also to practice listening to the different perspective that is also very relevant to social finance. To anchor the theme of the forum this year, philanthropy that listens, maybe I will start with you, Professor Azmi. What does listening mean to you when it comes to social finance?
Okay. Thank you very much, Maxine. First, let me thank Yayasan Hassana for inviting me to be one of the panel members here this afternoon. Just an introduction, my name is Azmi. I'm the president of a university, INSEF University, a university established by Central Bank of Malaysia, Bank Negara Malaysia. Before I joined INSEF as its president, I worked in Islamic Development Bank, helping member countries of Islamic Development Bank to implement Islamic finance. I've been working in Islamic finance for the last 40 years. So Islamic finance, Islamic social finance. So your question about listening for social enterprises. See, Islamic social finance, which is a term which I can claim that I invented the term in 2014, because prior to that it was just a social finance. The idea of Islamic social finance is to listen to the needs of the social enterprises. What kind of requirements they have, and then from there develop solutions, because we know that solutions can be, not everything can be done by banks. There are other solutions out there, and we are going to discuss next, is to look at the kind of solutions for social enterprises. Because as mentioned by the earlier speakers, they are operating in the third sector. So meaning that we can't just simply use the banking solutions or the corporate instruments for social finance, social enterprises. Obviously, as they grow and progress, we can look at different kind of instruments to support them. I will start at that.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that you brought up that you would always listen to the stakeholder, which is social entrepreneur here. And very fortunately today, we also have a social entrepreneur on this panel. So Suin, may I pass the question to you? What does listening mean to you, and especially when it comes to the topic of social finance?
what an honor to sit in here in front of all those great people. Thank you, Yayasan Hasana. So I'm CEO and co-founder of Enuma, an education technology startup that is also mission-driven. So our mission is to support all learners, including those with special needs, to be independent learners. So we are building solutions to help all learners actually learn the very basic level of education for basic reading, writing, and do math. We have two businesses. One is B2C business. So we are serving children in Japan, China, or Korea whose families just want to prepare their children for academic skills as early as possible. So it is quite good business. But at the same time, we are serving to B2G market. We call it impact business sometimes when it doesn't provide any meaningful revenue, because our goal is become part of public education system. So there is so many failure in public education system, and some of those problems actually can be supported with a digital tool that provide individualized education that fit to each children's level, regardless of their background in home. So for meaning of listening, because we want to become part of the system, we have to learn a lot of things, especially from the policymakers and school systems and teachers who are stakeholders and who will invite us to be a part of the system. It's a long journey. We start to listen, but we just make so many we lost so many clues on the way, so it's a kind of trial and error on the way. But by listening, by understanding, I hope that one day we can become a real collaborator of the large system.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shuin. Now I would like to move on to you, Yoshi.
Yep.
A lot of us know what a unicorn is, but at the same time, you've been advocating for the concept of zebra.
Yep.
And play a very important role in integrating this concept in the impact economy in Japan. Maybe you can explain what zebra means. Is there a definition?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Yayasan Hasana. Just a little bit of a relationship, my relationship with Yayasan Hasana. I met Siti, the managing director of Yayasan Hasana, last year in Tokyo, and we agreed a lot of things. We realized we have a lot in common. So I got invited here. I really appreciate this opportunity. So for the definition of zebra, we actually intentionally we don't have a definition of zebra. We have characteristics of zebra, which I could explain later on. If you ask me if there is a definition, there's no definition of zebra.
Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more why you think it's more suitable to name it with characteristics
Sure.
rather than definition?
Sure. Can I maybe just explain a little bit about how the concept is, what the concept is?
Yes, please.
Probably a lot of people are not familiar with. So zebra comes from my problem awareness through my impact investing career. I've been in the impact investing career for decades. And especially when I started, everybody was looking for impact unicorn, right? So which means basically you go exponential growth and you also make an impact. And a lot of times in impact investing, in the beginning especially, a lot of people are coming from the VC background or the investment fund background. So they are thinking about applying what they did for entrepreneurs for social entrepreneurs. Then everything will work out, right? But if you think about it, the unicorns or exponential growth, say like in 5 years you go for an IPO, there's very rare cases. And there's a lot more companies that makes profit, still grow, maybe not exponential, but still grow, and create a social impact. So we call these companies zebra, kind of against unicorn. Unicorn is an illusional animal, but the zebra is a real animal, and then also zebra makes a group, right? So mutualism is one of the very important concepts. having said that, the reason I said we don't have a definition is because having no clear definition of zebra creates actually a lot of argument for the people to think about. So people have an ownership about this concept. You know, you will ask, so what does zebra mean to me? What does this zebra concept mean to my company? So it creates a movement. So movement is one key concept for what we have done as you know, the groundwork for the social finance in Japan. So that's a little bit of a story. We have characteristics, which is, you know, of course, the social impact is one of the characteristics. Long-term view, multi-stakeholder view is another characteristics. Challenging complicated social problem is another one. And then you have a vision to share with others. We have these 4 characteristics, but not the you know, the definition like you have to have this amount of sales, you have to have a disproportionate of women employees or things like that. So.
Perfect, thanks a lot. So basically, the reason why there's no definition is because you want to also create room for flexibility and also innovation along the way as the zebra community grows, right? Maybe now I turn to Suin to share a little bit more about your journey as an impact entrepreneur, but also to raise impact capital. You have a fantastic track record of raising very different types of impact capital. Maybe you can share a little bit more about like what are the type of impact capital that you have raised so far, and also what are the roles of these capital at the different stage of growth of Anuma.
Just I learned that I'm one of the zebra with Yoshi's
I'm happy.
So, yeah. So we started in Silicon Valley as a venture-backed social enterprise. At that time, there was no term social enterprise. I just wanted to build software for children with special needs. So it's not very popular among typical Silicon Valley VCs. So the seed investment was mostly come from angels or education-oriented investors. However, so far we raised to $22 million US dollar, how can I say, equity capital, and also we receive about near to $10 million of non-stringed fund so far for last 13 years of journey. With the seed fund, we just built a software, and it actually became quite a big global hit. And after it became global hit, financial investors approached us and raised our Series A. But at that time, our problem is we designed it for children with special needs, but in reality, more than millions of people downloaded for their smart learners in wealthy families. And actually, we realized that we are creating the gap of the society rather than closing the gap. That problem is not a problem for other business people, but it was very big issue for mission-driven startup like us. And then we entered the Global Learning X Prize as we learn it. So there was a 5 years of competition that is run by UNESCO and World Food Program with a $15 million US dollar prize from Elon Musk. They wanted to know if tablet software only can teach illiterate students in rural area can learn how to read or write or do math without any reading adults' help. So after entering that competition, our Series A investor actually didn't like that idea. They think it's a waste of time to build something for children in rural area in Tanzania. So that's where we start to look around for other type of fund, like grant fund from Koika and the impact fund. At the time, we were very fortunate because it was a beginning of Korean impact fund movement that was mostly led by the government. So for our dream, group of impact investors actually raised the impact round for us to win the Global Learning X Prize to prove this concept to the world. After we became co-winner of Global Learning X Prize, we got $5 million cash directly come to our bank. That was sweetest part of all the story. But after that, we also had to raise another fund because we spent actually most of those money upfront to win the competition. Still, it was impact investors who really liked that idea and wanted us to scale. So we raised our Series B from mixture of impact investors in Korea and some of the financial investors. But at the same time, we actually divided our company's business into two different directions. One is B2C business that will make us sustainable, and another is impact business, we call it, to really create a systemic change with what we just proved and what we can do to the world. So to do that impact world, we promised to our investors we will search another type of capital and grant funding. We got a continuous grant funding from KOICA, and we are working with private foundations to enter a new country or to serve really marginalized community like refugee camps or deaf community in Tanzania or the immigrant families in Korea and so on. So it was quite a creative journey because we are still struggling to balance between our B2C business that is not enough to invest to our impact B2G business. And also, but we believe that there is a big opportunity in the future and continuously raise a fund from private investors, as well as we are searching for the grant and other alternative capitals to just achieve what we can do in the world.
This is really fantastic because you cover a really wide range of impact capital from grants, impact investor capital, as well as traditional equity. And I think it also anchors a lot to earlier messages, for example, from Temasek Foundation, how they see philanthropic capital can be catalytic at the seed stage. Also later on, for example, at certain pivotal points, or for example, when a social entrepreneur enter a new market or wanted to pilot like a certain new solution where there's a high risk, that's where grant capital or catalytic capital could come in and serve very effectively to bridge the gap. And on that point, Yoshi, I also know that you work with the government in Japan, as well as the private sector, to also kind of want to bridge this gap between the financial expectation, at the same time, the impact mission of zebras. Yep. Would you like to share a little bit more about your experience on that?
Sure. So Zebras and Company is my company. My company does a lot of things. Originally, I was thinking of creating maybe an impact fund or something to be an investor. But in the end, what we're doing is creating more about the ecosystem. So we do a lot of things. So we do investment, we do advisory work, we do advocacy with the government. We do kind of academic research work as well. And so what we achieved was basically in the second year, in 2023, the Japanese government, the previous Prime Minister Kishida, he decided to take this concept into one of the vital policy in Japan. Because this is a vital policy, all the ministries actually take a look at this policy to make their original policies. So in 2024, what happened was Ministry of Economy. We were working with the Ministry of Economy, and then we created the branch concept of zebra. It's called a local zebra, which is basically the government trying to create an ecosystem in each region in Japan around zebra companies. So that was another thing that happened. The interesting thing is actually the concept itself was created in the US originally. I brought it from the US to Japan, and I made a translated word, and I started spreading the concept. So what we have done actually so far is, I would say three things, right? I think the previous panel there's a similar conversation. So what we have done is, one is shifting people's mindset and creating a movement with the concept, strong concept of zebra. We have a very strong PR marketing because my co-founder is coming from that area. So we have our own media. We actually partner with a lot of media in Japan as well. So we spread the word to more community, ordinary people. This is the one thing. Two, we create the real examples in businesses. This is our investment. We also do a lot of advisory work. Combining these two, I think we have supported more than 50 companies in Japan. So people actually see the concept, they understand the concept, and then they have, they resonated to the concept. And with the real examples, actually, they can more deeply understand about what it is. And the third one is the government. The government means to us is to create a more system, right, or social system. So shifting the people's mindset, providing a real examples, and then now we are trying to make it as a real system in the society. That's part of the reason we work with the Ministry of Economy for this work, also Cabinet Office, and actually this year, 4 other ministries are joining, Ministry of Environment, Land and Infrastructure, Agriculture, and then also Finance. So this has been done so far. And we've been actually, of course we invested, and there have been more, mobilizing capital for zebra companies. But because of this groundwork we have done, it's actually now the time to move more capital in Japan for zebra companies. I've been talking with a lot of regional banks, for example, and then also big corporations. A lot of institutions actually now about to start financing zebra companies.
I think it's also very interesting because in some of our conversation you also mentioned it's also about translating and reframing what we understood as risk for deploying capital for zebra. So it's also about applying a new lens to understand the potential impact, which is the value that zebra is creating, and then therefore assessing the risk from a different perspective. But now, at this point, because we talk about engaging other types of stakeholders in the community, I would like to turn to Professor Azmi, because the Islamic finance community would be also very relevant, especially in Malaysia. And so we have observed that Islamic finance has evolved quite a bit from individual giving to more large-scale investment or instruments like Waqf and Sukuk. And it would be interesting to hear from you how this transition actually unlocked new ways to financial social impact in Malaysia, but maybe also in other countries like Indonesia and the Gulf states.
Okay, thank you very much. You see, if you trace the development of Islamic finance, it started in the 70s, the modern Islamic finance started in the 70s, and right until today, I think the focus was mainly coming from the banking sector, from the insurance, or what we call takaful, and then the capital market, suku, then Islamic funds, the equity market. I think for the last 10 years, we have been promoting another component of Islamic finance, what we call Islamic social finance. For those who do not know, Islamic social finance is an umbrella term that covers zakat. Zakat is a religious obligation based on income and asset, where you have to pay a certain percentage every year. So that is the zakat component. And then we have the wakaf component, which is similar to endowment. And then we have interest-free loan called Qardu Hasan. And then we have the donation, which is the sadaqah, we call. These are the components of Islamic social finance. People tend to think that these are all religious instruments, nothing to do to support either social enterprises or commercial. But that is wrong view altogether. We see more and more the role of Islamic social finance being promoted and used to support social enterprises, to support the micro, the small, and the medium enterprises. And I can give a lot of examples, both in Malaysia, in Indonesia, where I do a lot of work there as well, and in the Middle East. You know, one example that is very, very successful in Malaysia, which is currently implemented by Islamic banks in Malaysia, is the iTekat program created by Bank Negara, and this is coming out during the COVID times, because many people were unemployed, they need to create jobs. So how Bank Negara came on board is using Islamic social finance. You know, the micros and the small and medium enterprises, these are the B40s, what we call them. They need support. So using that philanthropic capital of zakat, and zakat can be used, say for example, yes, micro entrepreneurs, you require to buy equipments. Those equipments can be funded by zakat. Or you require capacity building. Those can be funded by zakat as well. You know, but we tend to think, zakat is religious, nothing to do with us. And this is the wrong notion, wrong thinking altogether. So that's why we should be looking at the Islamic social finance, zakat, wakaf, as powerful economic instruments to address those issues. And these are some of the issues that you raised this morning and this afternoon. And this is part of what we are doing now, engaging with different sectors to promote this. So one example, as I said, is the iTekat program. So much so that neighboring countries are coming to Malaysia to learn how we are doing this, utilizing the zakat for iTekat. So that's one example. The other example coming to, we have also banks in Malaysia like Bank Islam using Sadaqah House. Again, I wouldn't have the time to explain, but I want to go to another country, which is Indonesia. Indonesia used a different model. They use suku. Suku is basically the equivalent of bonds. They use suku, but what is interesting is they created as a cash wakaf linked suku. So basically using capital market instruments to create wakaf, and then the proceeds or the coupon of that suku is used to fund all the social enterprises for education, for health, for even green energy in rural areas. So that's another example, you know, using suku capital market instrument for social enterprises. That's in Indonesia. Then we go to Middle East. Even in UAE, they have created what they call a suku al-wakaf, where the government encourages not only individuals but also corporates to buy this suku. So when we say we buy suku al-wakaf, basically we are giving our philanthropic capital, and that money is used to fund social enterprise projects. So just imagine, from a religious instrument, now you are creating an economic instrument to address all those issues. That's in UAE. Saudi, the same thing. They have what we call the Wakaf Investment Fund, a big fund. This is what we call the cash wakaf, for the purpose of, again, the proceeds are for specific, to address, for example, the young mothers without having what they call it, housing. Because if you know, in Middle East, when you get married for young people, the male has to prepare everything to equip the house fully. And not in Malaysia, we are lucky. So to do that, there are NGOs that are providing. And the funding comes partly from the Wakaf Investment Fund. So, you know, that's how creative they have become. Similarly, in Malaysia, we have to be creative to address those issues. And I could go and on talking about those examples, but I think suffice to say that, given the limited time, it's a matter of how we think, we create innovative solutions using the Islamic social finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So if I understood correctly, there are different types of role that Islamic finance could play even within the realm of social finance. First of all, for example, you can use it as a catalytic capital At the same time, it can also be understood as patient capital, even though certain social innovation has kicked off, but also require a longer period of time to build economic viability. That's what I understood. Fantastic. But then speaking of which, now that we understand more about like the different role that Islamic finance could play in social finance, the question is priorities. Because there are many different priorities as well nowadays, including humanitarian relief that require more immediate response. So how can we balance the fact that we are able to address immediate relief, for example, towards humanitarian crisis, while at the same time ensuring that there is enough resources that are being allocated to more long-term systemic level impact creation, for example, by financing social enterprises?
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, we tend to think Islamic social finance and Islamic finance in a silo. Banking, capital market, they are not connected. I think the idea is what we should be thinking is to look as a continuum. A continuum in the sense that from A to Z. Let me begin by as an example. We know that, for example, if there's any disaster, and Malaysia is prone to floods, not earthquake, prone to floods. The idea has always been, okay, how do you help those people who are affected by floods? Then we use zakat. That is for the immediate thing. But we should also be thinking of how do we prevent those flood victims. Again, we can use zakat instruments for flood prevention rather than just reactive to floods and then using zakat to support them. So that's one continuum. Another continuum is that as we go along, they require certain assets. Those assets can be funded either zakat or the wakaf. Okay? Then if we take in the case of the social enterprises which are involved in small and medium enterprises, or micro and small and medium enterprises, we can have what we call a breakdown in the context of whether they are unbankable or whether they are bankable. Again, providing different types of Islamic social finance solutions for them using a combination of sadaqah, zakat, wakaf, those things. And then once they are bankable, then we have the Islamic finance component. And that Islamic finance component can also include Qadha Hasan, where, for example, Bank Islam in Malaysia is using the interest-free loan. You get a loan where you only pay the principal back without any interest or any profit margin. So that component is also brought into the picture. And then finally, of course, the commercial return expected from the commercial financing. So we have that range of instruments that are available. The key thing now is, as I said, from the Islamic social finance is to bring them into the economic sphere as an economic instrument. And I'm glad that, for example, in Malaysia, I think there is a strong move towards that. But in a number of countries like Indonesia, this is already being implemented. My involvement in this area, I would say that zakat management in Malaysia is very strong. I give an example. Collection of zakat in Kuala Lumpur, where we are now, amounts to roughly, annual collection now, amounts to roughly 400 million US dollars. Significant amount, about 1.2 billion ringgit in terms of zakat collection. Just imagine how powerful it is if you use it properly through proper governance standards. So that's an example. If you combine the whole of Malaysia, it's much more significant. But wakaf, Malaysia is not as strong as Indonesia. So those are the things that we need to identify the gaps and address that. And work is been going on. For example, in my university, we have a dedicated center looking at those issues and providing solutions to that. So we're working with the religious authorities. And of course, working with religious authorities also require us to work with the higher level of religious authority, which is the Majlis Agama or state religious authority, to provide solutions to that. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think it was a very powerful number that you were sharing earlier about the amount of Islamic finance simply in KL here, how much we can unlock with that capital. But again, back to our very first question, which is, well, how can we use these capital very effectively from the perspective of also the end users, in this case, the social entrepreneur. So Suin, I would like to get back to you. Since you have experience raising different types of impact capital, is there any particular financial instrument or terms that was particularly helpful for you as a mission-driven entrepreneur and support you to balance both the financial ambition as well as the impact goal that you have at Anuma?
So I love our impact investors because there is two pillars of impact investment nowadays. So they want to look for the same level of financial return, but at the same time, they are caring about what impact we are creating in the world. So it's very helpful to actually pursue those two rabbits at the same time as an entrepreneur in this very complicated world. However, what I am still trying to figure out is most of impact investment actually using the same Silicon Valley term. So to get the return, they need to exit this company, right? To liquidate this company. So for us, there are not many options. Selling our company to other company, there is not many impact unicorn who will actually build our impact to the higher ground. It will be mostly other just a general education company that is not aligned with us, but just want to have our tech. Or just grow deal really high to just make an IPO on our own. That's another very, very big goal. And sometimes it's difficult to balance between what we want to create as a mission to what we can do with all those technology and employee in our hand. So I am still having some nightmare that somebody just come there, whether they are impact investor or just financial investor, hey, Suin, it's a time to exit. Know what I mean? When we are not ready, right? When we are not agreeing with, is this the best way to create our impact continuously meaningful in the world? So that's the, yep. I believe that this issue is actually happening in impact ecosystem, and we just try to figure out so far.
That's why you need the zebra investors.
I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on your experience on that point.
Yeah, so just like she said, if you make a fund, there's always a fund life, right? Usually it's 10 years. It's somehow it's a world standard. Then usually in the investment for investors, you need like sourcing term for maybe like 2-3 years in the beginning, and then you need an exit term for maybe like 2 years in the last. So the remaining time is only 5 years. That's why for each company you have, they require you to exit in 5 years. What we have done is I create, so in the end, I didn't create, technically speaking, we didn't create a fund. So we don't have a fund, we don't have a fund life. We invest from our balance sheet. So it's a principal investment, which means we can provide actually permanent capital. So, so it's not the reason for the fund side to exit, but we can reason, we can make, we can exit when the company is ready or when the market is ready. So that's one thing. Another thing I'm thinking about is private credit, right? There's actually a lot of different types of needs for zebra companies. It's not only an equity, risk capital. In the beginning, maybe you need a risk capital. That's what we provide, patient capital, longer term capital. Then as you grow, you need working capital, you need maybe bridge finance. There's a lot of different needs. And actually, at least in Japan, the traditional financial institutions cannot meet this need because maybe you're too young, you don't have a credit. So even if you are, you have a good business, you have a very bright future, whatever it is, it's really hard for them to raise this type of capital too. So I'm trying to kind of set up the financial instruments. Also, that's why I've been talking with lots of regional banks, so that if I can change them to see the companies, the risk, the company's risk, and then if they can see the lens of the zebra, you can actually de-risk from a different way, so that they can also provide the, what do you call it, the mezzanine or private credit. Yep, back to you.
Fantastic. I think a lot of times when we talk about social finance, and also as Suin said, even though for impact investors, there is still a tendency to stick to the term sheet that they already know. And I totally resonate with that. And that's also just to share one of the experience in our own fundraising experience is that, well, actually, one of the investment terms that we're using is a variation of safe notes, which is very commonly used in traditional venture capital world, so to speak. But then in our particular investment round, how much we return in terms of the loan payment is tied to our impact KPIs. And one of our impact KPI being that, well, how many other players are we supporting to learn how to deploy more effective impact financing instruments? Just sharing this here that, yes, we would like to embed impact in financing instruments, and there are also easier ways that kind of meet the others in the middle, and stick to the traditional financial terms, and yet still with the possibility to enhance the impact element in there. Speaking of impact, before I actually wanted to talk about a topic that we didn't get to highlight a lot, which is impact measurement and management. So Suin, again, back to you. I'm quite curious how the impact measurement and management process has evolved as Enuma grow. And also I'm curious how the conversation is when it comes to impact measurement when you talk to different types of funders.
Shortly. In our case, we are very lucky because through the X Prize and with all those deployment in the field, we have a quite good impact metric ourselves. It's a learning gain. So we have a very strong learning gain through the X Prize. And whenever we deploy it in what country, in what environment, we continuously and consistently create quite good amount of learning gain. And we can say, hey, this is how we create the impact. If there is a spend the money and decide to use the digital devices in their environment, we actually deliver the outcome. However, in the case of grant fund, usually they are more about the short-term number, like number of recipients, right? Or our children actually spend on the devices, or the number of download. So that is actually not very, how can I say, relate with the healthiness of the company or our growth potential. Our impact investors, most of our impact investors and our financial investors are focusing on just the business metrics like the revenue and number of real paying user, and our strategy to grow into the hockey stick course on the way. I believe that those are all very balanced. It's because we have very lucky type of social businesses that can prove it as a learning gain with some of the very solid number. But nowadays, the issue in the world is actually moving very fast to the new technology, right? So some of the metric we know so far, and some of the idea we run as a playbook is changing very rapidly. And I believe that impact investors and grant funders and us, a technology company, are all together to figure out what is going on and how we can still create the largest impact.
What I'm hearing is there is a lot of room for listening to co-create the impact indicators that tends to be staying on the outcome level, so it's not overly distracting as you move into different directions. Wonderful. So at this stage, actually, I would like to get back to our panelists to summarize a little bit for our audience. What would be the one take-home message that you would like to reinforce for our audience to go take home with about social finance? Professor Azmi, would you like to kick us off?
Okay, thank you very much. My takeaway is this. I mean, the Islamic social finance, as I mentioned earlier on, zakat, sadaqah, wakaf, those Qadr Hasan, those are seen to be religious instruments. I think what we need to do is to make it as economic instruments, financial instruments, and use those instruments to address issues like the activities that are done by the social enterprises. You know, so the work needs to be done, and this is already starting in Malaysia, converting it to an economic instruments, and those to address all those needs. But bear in mind, governance is very important, because we do know that in Malaysia, many organizations that are using zakat fail to have proper governance. So bringing to the economic instruments, economic sphere, proper governance with proper regulation. That would be a powerful instrument to address those issues that are raised today in this forum. That's it.
Suing?
For me, when I first started this work, some VC actually think venture-backed social enterprise is oxymoron. They think it doesn't make sense. So they advise me to just earn money as much as possible and build a non-profit and give this money away as a philanthropy. Or some people was a bit upset because we asked grant, but as a form of for-profit company, right? However, slowly I realized it's more teamwork. I also didn't know how I can run a tech company that require all those stock options and high growth and ROI with this technology can stay as a social enterprise. But some new terms coined and new investors just joined to the community, and the community actually raise us and sometimes guide us where to go. So I think that especially if you are just still dealing with to figure out what category this social enterprise is and how this company will ever exit, or how we can actually build a community surrounding those new type of social enterprise, we will all explore together as a community. It's a teamwork, and believe in the future. Don't try to judge it right away.
Fantastic message. And Yoshi, would you like to wrap this up for us?
Yes, I think the same thing can be said for funders, right? So there's not, so the funding is not the only thing, right? But as a funder, there's a lot of things you can do or you have to do. I think I've heard a word of systemic change in a lot of panels, right? There's a word in the impact investing space, investors' contribution, which means basically as an investor, you can not only just fund the companies or ventures, but there's also a lot of things you can do: advocacy, you can do, engaging in the community, you can collaborate with other countries, because you're funders. I think it can be said also for philanthropists or foundations, right? Because you're funders, you're foundations, there's so much you can do, and that's as the title is laying the groundwork for social finance. Before the finance, there's a lot of things, and there's, you can do so many. I think, and then also because we're in Asia, and I'm living in Asia, we have a lot in common. And as you said, collaboration. Across Asia, I think there's a reason to unite. There's, we can do collaboration, we can do the groundwork, and in the end, we can do scaling the social finance. So that's my takeaway.
Thank you very much. And I know that we're at time, so thank you very much, dear panelists. Thank you for sharing your different and very valuable perspective.
Thank you so much, Ms. Maxim.